Hello, and welcome to my presentation on Let's Build the Metaverse. I want to talk to you about the metaverse, not only about the technology that's enabling this new metaverse, but also about the trends and the human behaviors that are really going to flourish because of the metaverse, and talk about how, if the metaverse is the future of the internet, how we can build the best version of the metaverse. My name is Tipatat Chennavasin. I am general partner of the Venture Reality Fund. We are the leading early stage investor in VR, AR, AI, and the metaverse. I did my undergrad degree at Stanford University with a concentration on human-computer interface. I've been a VR and AR developer, a VR artist, and more importantly, an investor and advisor for VR, AR, AI, and metaverse startups. We've looked at over 6,000 companies in the space. We've invested in over 43, including some of the most well-known players in the space, including Epic Games, Rec Room, Wave, and Theta Labs. I'm also a speaker at many VR and AR conferences, and I'm a mentor for VR and AR incubators and accelerators worldwide. So I want to kind of talk about what is the metaverse and focusing on three core activities, this idea of play, live, and work, which I think are the cornerstone of what the metaverse will provide for people. Then we'll talk about some of the key components and technologies that make up the metaverse and the importance of both VR and AR, and also blockchain technologies for enabling the best versions of the metaverse. And then we'll wrap it up with a quick summary. So for the past 2 years, everyone has really been talking about the metaverse, although, of course, as a concept in science fiction, it's lived much longer than that, originating in Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. But more importantly, as it's rised up in prominence now, it's because the metaverse is now officially possible. And I think Facebook has been at the forefront of this. Mark Zuckerberg has famously stated earlier this year that within 5 years, Facebook will not be known as a social media company, but will be known as a metaverse company. And of course, the rumors are that he may be changing the name of the company to really showcase and highlight this new North Star for them. But what he's actually said about the metaverse is that it's a virtual environment where you can be present with people in digital spaces. It's the successor to the mobile internet. And this idea that, again, it's thinking about the internet as 2D, then this next step of the internet being 3D embodied, much more natural behaving, and hopefully provide a more richer experience. I think that's the core of what Mark Zuckerberg is talking about here. And then, Tim Sweeney at Epic Games, their activities with Fortnite definitely puts them as one of the top players in what could become the metaverse. He talks about the metaverse is going to be far more persuasive and powerful than anything else. And that if one central company gains control of all of this, they will become more powerful than any government and be a god on earth. So now, again, if we think about what are the ramifications here, if we really truly build this 3D internet, and what will it mean for people's lives, I think Tim Sweeney accurately sees the huge potential and impact that this will have, and how important it is that it's not being controlled by just one central company. Now, Tim Cook has talked about AR, and specifically talking about how overlaying a virtual world over the real world, but the idea is combining the physical world with the digital world and enhancing your relationships and enhancing your collaboration. I think that's one of the core fundamental activities in the metaverse. And this idea of not necessarily escaping into a digital world, but actually improving your world, both in the digital world and in the physical world. And really fascinating, even the official US government through the US District Court in their ruling on Epic versus Apple had to define the metaverse, and they called it a digital virtual world where individuals can create character avatars and play them through interactive programs and created experiences. But I think it's interesting that even the government has had to take a strong stance on what the metaverse is. And then I think one of the most telling quotes that I've seen recently, it was from Tencent official, and they had put out a little infographic explaining their view on the metaverse. And at the very end of that, they mentioned Tencent is closest to the metaverse. And I think this is actually very true because, again, Tencent is a major investor in Epic Games, and they also, of course, run some of the biggest social platforms and gaming platforms. And so, understanding this combination of gaming and social being core components of the metaverse, then Tencent would definitely be one of the bigger players. But overall, if we look at this, we can see everyone, in terms of the largest technology companies in the world, are really thinking about, talking about, and building this metaverse future. But let's dig in a little deeper and let's think about what is the metaverse. And I think the opportunity, and what I think is really interesting, everyone's throwing up their own definitions, trying to explain what it is, trying to define what it is, and I think this is the opportunity now. When we're defining it, let's take the best versions, the best ideas, and bring them together to build truly the best metaverse. And I think of some of the things that people say in common when they talk about the metaverse are distilling that into this idea of, okay, it's a collection of persistent virtual worlds with large online communities, and they offer diverse social, media, entertainment, and commerce experiences that allow people to live a fulfilling digital life. And I really like this idea too, a fulfilling digital life, so that they can do things like work, and they can live, but they can also play and do it all digitally and have it mean something, be satisfying, having it be a positive experience. And as I've described it, you could say, okay, well, these things kind of exist already, and definitely certain parts of it exist, and even maybe all of it together kind of exists. But think about how many people is it really impacting? And I think this idea now is, with the metaverse, we're going to take shared virtual worlds and truly make it mainstream and impact billions of people that live on this planet. So like I mentioned, what does it mean to live a fulfilled digital life, or just a fulfilled life in general? Really, I think these are the core activities that make up, the metaverse. And we'll start with play. And of course, play in the digital world means video games. Everything from casual gaming on your mobile phone, hardcore gaming on a PC or console, online, single player, multiplayer, all of that. We'll talk a little bit more about the trends that we're seeing in the space, but fundamentally, play is one of the biggest activities on the planet right now in terms of just time spent and money spent. And then live, this idea of what is life? I mean, of course, play is a part of life, but what does non-playing life look like? And that's socializing, meeting with other people, sharing our thoughts and ideas. And that, of course, is embodied today by social networks and social media. And then there's also enjoying storytelling through movies, film, and literature, music, fashion. There's so much more, in terms of enjoying, creating culture and enjoying culture. And so that's, of course, a huge part of our lives. And then really, I think the biggest opportunity, and what makes the metaverse different than other previous virtual worlds or online groups, is a much stronger emphasis on work, earning a living, making a livable wage as part of the digital economy. And right now, digital economy jobs, IT jobs, programming, anything from creating the programs and creating the internet to now authoring content on top of it. I think, that spectrum has widened and broadened over the years. And what I like about this idea about expanding the digital economy, or expanding the people that can benefit from the digital economy, is, if we think about it, the digital economy is infinite and never ending. There's always a demand for more, but it's also not resource limited. So, of course, there is electricity, but beyond that, you can think of that as one of the few very sustainable economies that are out there, right? Now, if we look at the intersections between some of these activities, some of these cores, we can already see behaviors or activities or platforms that exist that kind of show off what this looks like. And so, the combination of play and live, we're seeing, massive online games, of course, but they also have non-game entertainment content like virtual concerts and movies. So Fortnite and Roblox, you primarily think about as games, but after they've matured, they've become these hangout spots for the younger generation, where they will go and hang out and watch concerts or watch movies or watch entertainment or listen to albums with their friends. And so it blends the line between play and live. In that same way, when we look at games with in-game economies and user-generated content like MMOs, Roblox, Rec Room, and others, you could see that users are creating content that then they sell to other users and monetize, make money. And we're already hearing stories about how people are earning a livelihood on these. And now recently, there's been a new type of game, we'll talk about this more, where they have a model of play to earn, where through just playing the game, you actually can get virtual currency or virtual tokens that then you cash out for real world. And people are making in some countries, and some third world countries are making things like 3 times minimum wage there, and it's incredible. And then the combination of social or living and working, we're seeing things like creator economies created on platforms like YouTube and Instagram, where these influencers are creating content and then they can monetize that with advertisers, and they're actually effectively earning a living making content for the internet and live and on these social networks. And so we think about this intersection of all three is really what the metaverse will enable and make possible for many more people. Because like we said, in these intersections between play and work and live and work, right now it's just a small part of the population that can do these jobs. But as we really combine all three together, we can see more and more people will be able to do this. So let's dive deeper into gaming and some of the gaming trends that we're seeing. Globally now, we can say that gaming is now the biggest leisure activity. I think it's really telling, again, starting with Generation X, it was really 79% of people say they play video games at least weekly. And with later generations, it becomes more and more prevalent. And you can see in this chart, it's like Generation Z may be the first where video first is not their major favorite entertainment activity, and it really is gaming. And this translates to huge numbers. So just for context, right, we thought of World of Warcraft being huge at the time, right? And it was 12 million MAU in 2010 at the kind of height of its popularity when it first launched. But now we compare that to the online games that we're seeing now, and Fortnite with over 350 million registered players, they have about 80 million MAU in 2020. And then Roblox has about 202 million MAU in 2021. And so you could see that over time, right, the amount of gamers and the amount of people that are connected to this gaming activity has just exploded. And the average gamer plays about 8 hours and 27 minutes each week. But then you think that's across all the generations, and specifically in the younger generations, like the Roblox players, they're playing 2.6 hours a day, almost double the amount that the average plays. And so this is a trend that's just continuing. And so now when we think about, okay, these kids are growing up in a 3D world, playing in a 3D playground, will they be satisfied with a 2D internet? No, definitely not. And of course, this also translates into huge money. And so what we're seeing here is that global video game industry had made, according to IDC, almost 180 billion in 2020. That's more than the global film, which did 100 billion in 2019. That's pre-pandemic numbers. And then North American sports, which was 75 billion. And so easily seeing how video games as an industry is just making huge money. And now looking at Apple, what's really interesting is, Apple doesn't think of themselves as a gaming company. They can put out games per se, but as one of the, most largest and most profitable tech platforms out there, they make 8.5 billion in profits from gaming in 2019. And about 70% of their app store revenue is games. And so you can definitely see how games absolutely have become the biggest leisure activity. So let's talk about live, trends that we're seeing in this space. Definitely this idea of, how do we interact in the digital world beyond just gaming? And I don't think anyone would argue that this isn't a controversial idea that social media has taken over our lives. On average, users spend 2 hours and almost 30 minutes per day on social media in 2020. 3.2 billion people actively using social networks. And of course, this is spread across multiple networks. But when you think about this, like, I think it's very clear now that people are really concerned about what are the negative impacts that these big social medias and their reach can have on the population at large. And we'll get back to that more. But it's not just about social media. When we think about these social activities that people do, music is a big part of our lives. How we enjoy music, especially with our friends, has really changed in the digital world. And like I mentioned before, there are now these virtual concerts that have tens of millions of attendees, spending real money, either to attend or to buy virtual goods. And Travis Scott doing his performance in Fortnite, which was actually their second virtual concert, was huge in kind of showing that this just wasn't just a one-time thing. And again, it's not just about Fortnite. We're seeing this across other platforms like Roblox as well, where Lil Nas X had 33 million viewers. And even on social networks, The Weeknd did a virtual concert powered by a company called The Wave. And that was actually on TikTok, not in a game. And that had over 2 million live views, but 1.6 billion social video views. And so you can see the impact of these are enormous. And it's not just a one-time thing, but it's becoming part of the music and entertainment culture. And, when we think about life and we think about, we talked about socializing, we talked about music, and of course, fashion is a very big part of everyone's lives, identity and art. When we think about culture, we think about all of these other aspects of how we present ourselves and who we are. And we can see that the digital version is also becoming a lucrative industry in and of itself. And, Fortnite, it's very interesting. I think Forbes was the one that pointed out that Fortnite, majority of, if we think about what they do, the virtual goods that are being sold, a lot of it is actually digital skins or virtual fashion. And so if you look at that in that way, Fortnite's virtual fashion industry made as much money as Amazon, about 3 billion in profit all the way back in 2018. And, even just one set of, one line from the NFL did about 50 million in revenue. So that's just kind of showing what's the potential for buying virtual digital dresses and accessories that, again, don't have a correlation to the real world. And even more recently, we're seeing the fashion world really push into this idea of, digital dresses for avatars. And, Dolce & Gabbana sold a digital dress collection recently for 6 million. And it's not just about fashion. We're also seeing art and collectibles as well. Dapper Labs is very well known, working with the NBA for their Top Shot NFT product. They did about 700 million in sales, in initial sales and secondary sales, in less than a year in 2021. And then also, not just Dapper Labs, but the entire NFT sales volume in the first half of 21 was reportedly $2.5 billion. So really, this idea of buying and selling virtual goods, almost unheard of or almost unthinkable 20 years ago, has now become commonplace and very big business. Now work, like I mentioned before, I think this is where we're seeing some of the most interesting trends, and we're redefining what is work, and especially what is digital work. And and originally, IT work was sitting at a desk and writing code, but now it's so many other things. So the 2D internet creator economy, essentially, it's this idea that social media influencers, streamers, bloggers, YouTube creators, they create content for the internet, and they monetize some directly through tips and support from their audience, but majority are monetizing through ads and advertisers. So YouTube paid out $30 billion in 3 years to content creators, and TikTok has a 200 million creator fund that they say will grow up to $1 billion in 3 years. And so you can see, again, more and more people, and it is the case where in the creator economy as it is right now, it's really the superstars that stand out and they make the most. But I think, one of the big challenges of the current creator economy is that its revenue is from advertising. And that what we've seen is ad-driven economy lead to a toxic, attention-based ecosystem where it's all about sensationalizing to drive clicks, to get the most views. And that leads to sometimes bad behavior, as we've seen, where anger and misinformation really thrive in these kinds of ecosystems, and they encourage bad behavior by the platforms to do things like selling user data so you can have more targeted ads. And so this all creates a kind of toxic environment that honestly, I think we're all thinking about and reassessing, is this the right way forward? And so what I really find fascinating about the metaverse and very promising about the metaverse is that they have a different type of creator economy. Instead of a media-based creator economy, now creators for the metaverse are building 3D objects, 3D avatars, digital goods, and interactive experiences that they can be sold directly to other players. And so now it's not just about, hey, can I drive more eyeballs to this to get pennies? It's like, okay, no, if I build something that people enjoy, they will actually pay real money so that you could live a real, livable wages. Roblox has already paid out $250 million to their user-generated content developers in 2020, and top developers earn $2 million a year. And I love the story of kids playing a game or building within this game and are able to pay off their parents' mortgage or their college tuition. And there's over 345,000 developers in the Roblox ecosystem. So roughly about 5% of Roblox creator or developers are creators, as opposed to the entire player audience. Now, how's this changing as we move to a more fully immersive metaverse? I think Rec Room is a great example of this. So Rec Room started off as a VR-first user-generated content social gaming platform. Think about it as like a Roblox 2.0. And while, again, they're still much earlier, they have about 25 million users, but they're already at 13% that are creators and are already paying out their creators over $1 million in 2021. So even in this smaller scale, which is still a pretty significant sample size, you can see that there are more and more people are being part of this creator economy, and that they're actually making some significant money. And again, as we think about this next metaverse, Facebook is creating their platform, which is Horizon Worlds, which again is a user-generated content 3D social world. And they've already announced that they will have a $10 million creator fund to empower the creators for their metaverse platform. And so you can see that the creator economy will be a big, important part of the metaverse, but it will be a better creator economy than what we have today, because it will be based on direct payment and not clicks and eyeballs. But there's also a new type of economy that's propping up, that I kind of hinted to before, that's not part of the creator economy, but is a way for people to be paid in the metaverse. And it's through actually playing the game, this play to earn concept. So games where you get a virtual reward for playing that can be cashed out for real world money. And this idea has existed for a while, but we've only recently seen it actually work at scale. And right now, the biggest and best example of this is a game called Axie Infinity that was created in Vietnam, but is now very huge in the Philippines and other emerging economies. And what they saw, or what they see today, is about 33 million in daily sales and trades of their NFT game characters, and over 2 billion in sales since the inception of the game. But what's really interesting is what this means for the individual players. So there are players in the Philippines that are earning 3 times minimum wage and are using it as a primary source of income. And what's really interesting is, so the way it works is, as you're playing, you have these like virtual, it's kind of Pokemon-esque. You have these virtual characters and you have to kind of buy them. And as they grow with you, they accumulate in value. But then as you battle others, then you get this other, virtual token that then you can, if you win, and then you can cash that out as well. And so you make money by either cashing out the virtual tokens that you get from winning, or from selling, buying, breeding, and training the virtual pets themselves. And so you actually need to buy some virtual pets to get in, and it can actually be a little bit daunting at first, especially in these emerging economies. But they now have companies that are offering sponsorships, scholarship programs to sponsor payers to help with this high upfront fee. But we're seeing is this model, this idea of play to earn, is just changing what it means to do work in the future into the digital economy and into the metaverse. So now let's dig into some of the technology that is necessary to make this happen. And we think about, again, one of the key components of the metaverse is a persistent virtual world, right? We need, and to make a persistent 3D world that's immersive and that can support a wide range of users and activities, well, we need a 3D engine with physics and scripting. And, I think, again, there are really great existing 3D engines out there like Epic's and Unreal Engine, and of course the Unity engine, and of course people can roll up their own or build off of open source engines as well. And then you need an avatar character system, something that will really let people express themselves, be creative, but it's also emotive and has that ability to be upgraded or personalized with virtual goods. And then, of course, you need large-scale real-time social interaction. And so you need, high-speed networks that are low latency, that allow people to interact and make it feel like they're really there together in the same place. And of course, you need some kind of cloud compute and storage to keep all of this, because it needs to be persistent. It needs to stay across multiple sessions and hopefully be accessible anywhere. So then the other key component that we talked about was a functioning economy. And this idea is that, okay, we want to buy and sell digital items that can be converted to real world value. And so, like I mentioned, there needs to be a user generated content component and, tools to make user generated content. There has to be digital goods, which are, typically the content that's created. And then a virtual currency to buy and sell these goods. And then a way to cash out that virtual currency for real world money. And so again, this is how it benefits not just the digital life, but then the real world life as well. And then lastly, we need interoperability. We need this to be something where, again, like Tim Sweeney warned, we don't want it to be owned by just one corporation. We want this to be something that could be fair and equitable for everyone. And I think a lot of this kind of points to this idea of decentralized ownership. And of course, there will be virtual worlds that are owned by corporations, but then on top of that, another layer where you can then take your identity and digital possessions and bring it from one closed virtual world to another closed virtual world. And to enable that to happen, you'll also need, of course, file and format standards. And I think it's really interesting here where we talk about the fundamentals of play, live, work. Interoperability doesn't necessarily have to be a part of that for those things to all kind of function. You can still do play, live, work in one centralized ecosystem. But I think what we really have seen with the way that the internet works right now is that giving too much power to one could have very damaging effects. And so this idea of really decentralizing ownership, making sure it's more easy to take your identity across different platforms, I think is going to be very much a key part of the metaverse. So where does VR and AR play into this idea of the metaverse? I think absolutely virtual worlds, they're already popular without needing VR and AR. They work really great. A lot of people access it. But I think this reminds me of the internet before there were smartphones. And again, the internet was great for people with desktops and laptops, but it wasn't really until people had smartphones that internet usage really exploded. And it wasn't just about having a computer in your pocket and having it available everywhere you were. Honestly, I strongly believe that the biggest innovation of smartphones was that intuitive user interface that allowed everyone to use computers and the internet easily in a very intuitive and natural way. When I grew up, you actually had to take classes to learn a computer, and it was just this thing. And now with the natural interface of smartphones, people get it and they understand it right away and they can use it. And, it's been a game changer. And so what I've learned from the past, 5 to 6 years now of really deep diving into the VR AR space is that, of course, the immersion of looking around and seeing the digital world in 6 degrees of freedom is amazing. But really, what provides the most profound experiences and opportunities is the gesture controls. It's not just seeing the digital world, but interacting with it in a natural way. And so I think, gesture controls are the multi-touch for 3D. And this is especially important, not just for the gaming part, but what we talked about more was the productivity part, this idea about user-generated content. Well, what does it look like right today to build 3D content? It looks kind of like CAD, and it's pretty daunting. But as you can see in this video, painting in VR, making 3D content in VR is just magical and much more intuitive. And if it could feel like playing with Legos or sculpting clay to make 3D content, well, anyone and everyone could do it. And so this is why I think, again, XR will impact the metaverse like mobile did the internet. And we're going to see an explosion, both in the number of users, but also in types of usage, brand new use cases that we never imagined, just like how mobile created lots of different uses for the internet that we would never have thought of if it wasn't for the mobile revolution. And so what about the blockchain and blockchain technologies? How do they interact? And you've seen, I've kind of talked about it throughout, but now I just want to kind of bring it back to the foreground here. And, this idea of interoperability is really going to be, or not that it has to be, but I think it can be very much enabled by the blockchain, right? This idea of not being tied to just one platform, but being able to own your own digital information and then bring it with you to any virtual world that you want to go to. Like blockchain is one way of doing that. And one usage of the blockchain is cryptocurrency. And what's interesting about cryptocurrency and how it intersects with the metaverse, well, one way, of course, is that cryptocurrency can be the virtual currency in that digital world. And we're seeing blockchain metaverse platforms like Decentraland and others, and they have their own cryptocurrency. But then what's really interesting is a lot of times they connect to other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum or, because it allows people to jumpstart their economies, right? And so we're seeing this kind of interplay between virtual economies in the metaverse and cryptocurrencies, and then that being the bridge to getting it closer into real world value. And then, of course, NFTs, which I've talked about, especially in the fashion and digital goods section, really, NFTs is another use of the blockchain, this idea that now with digital goods, you can make them scarce and unique and have distinct ownership of these unique virtual goods. And we're seeing it, of course, being used for digital art, collectibles, avatars, fashion, game items, and more. What's really interesting is that with NFTs, it allows not just for people to profit from the selling of it, but also the creator who created the NFTs and potential owners along the way can each get a cut of the secondary sale, which is a kind of new type of economic incentive that could be very powerful within this emerging economy. So in summary, I really want to thank you for listening. I hope this was interesting. I think it really comes down to this idea of let's think about what the best version of the metaverse is, starting with this fundamental understanding that the metaverse is a collection of persistent virtual worlds with diverse activities and functioning economies that allow for people to live a fulfilling digital life. That the core activities of play, live, work must all be present for it to be a real, true metaverse, or else it would just be a social network or a virtual world. And really that this isn't something brand new that we're creating, but we're taking existing trends and behaviors and now taking it to the mainstream. Whereas right now, maybe millions of people are engaging with parts of the metaverse, we can now bring it to billions of people. And I think, the one thing I want us to all think about is how we can now take this moment to think about what we've learned from both the good and the bad from the internet and the 2D web, and thinking about how we can improve upon that as we make the 3D internet. So I'll leave you with this other interesting, data point that I saw was that, on average now, the adults in the US, we spend about 8 hours a day, about half of our waking life engaging with the digital world. And I think, this opportunity now is with the metaverse, we can make that time richer and more valuable. So when you're thinking about the metaverse, and you're thinking about what you're building or how you're engaging or how you're interacting with it, let's all think with that in mind about how we can make that time we spend in the digital world much more satisfying, much more positive, much more beneficial, not just for us, but for the world at large. Thank you very much. And please, if you're building anything in the metaverse, in VR, AR, or AI, reach out to me. I'm Tipatat at the VR Fund. I'm Tipatat at Twitter. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was educational and enjoyable. Domo arigato.